Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Tuesday. It is April 6th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And in the end, this is really just a range day. We got outside the overnight highs and lows, but you can see this is really probably where your highs are. And you can see we broke out a little bit up there, but most everything is inside these overnight highs and lows. We might have traded outside momentarily just a couple of times up there as prices tried to push higher. I'm going to remove the range, the magenta color there, just so you can kind of see the way I looked at it. I didn't really play it as a range. I played it as this uptrend, but notice we got a break, two legs up, and then we reversed, and then we got two legs down. There's pretty much two measured legs down here, and that's how I played it. I really thought we would go higher here. I actually took a trade that I've recorded today. I believe it's this long right here. There was actually two second entry longs back to back there. And I was really hoping we'd run up and make a new high here, two legs up or so, or really inside. We're still inside the trend line here. So I was really hoping we'd push on higher towards our 4,100 target that we're shooting for. But it just didn't happen, and got a nice scalp, and I could have taken some profits on the runner, but I tried to let this one run, hoping it would break higher and go on, and so I really I broke even on the runner. You'll see the trade. It's uploaded now to YouTube and also uploaded to the website, and so you should see it shortly if you hadn't already seen it. But anyway, sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you get it you're wrong on your runners, and you just don't get one. And so I got a little greedy on that one, and I probably could have made a couple of points there on a runner at minimum. Normally, I will try to scalp out at the next resistance, and you can see we had some resistance here, then here, and then we came back up in the same place again. So that probably would have been a great place to exit, or I probably should have at least moved my safety stop up to one tick below this bar when it broke lower. I would have at least gotten a couple of points out of that runner. So I didn't really, let's just see what I would have gotten. If I entered one tick above that one, I would have entered at 71. And if I exited one tick below that one, would have been 72.5. So I would have got another 1.5 out of that time. So that's another 5. Another 7.5 points I probably left on the table that I could have picked up. But sometimes if you want to get those bigger runners, you got to give it more room. And I really was hoping to get a big runner here, but it just didn't happen. So that's the way it goes. Sometimes you get those runners, sometimes you don't. But anyway, let's get on to the chart lesson. You can clearly see really up till this break and new high just before lunch, I was playing the uptrend. And then you had this downtrend correction and a second leg down. Really that took us into 2 o'clock. So most of the day was spent in this upper part of the trading range area here. So this was actually a pretty nice trade or sell-off here. And there was a great opportunity to catch that on a failed second entry long, and it's actually a second entry short as well. So this was a great opportunity to get short if you were still trading at that time. So, but there's a couple of long trades here early on, and we'll talk about those shortly. But let's back out here. We'll go through these trades, and we'll try to wrap this day up. But you can clearly see the two-tiered blue channel. It was fairly obviously when it bounced here. I mean, I felt pretty confident with it based on this top. I drew it off the first two trends, but when we bounced here coming back, I felt pretty confident with it. 7 o'clock actually came right in here, and there's a second entry long right here. I didn't mark it because we're in this downtrend coming back down. This looks like a range here really at this point, and we're not quite back to the lows either where we've been bouncing down here. So I just felt that was too, there is a little bit of room back to the EMA, but there's not much room back to that possible trend line. And we could have got another measured leg down like that at that point. So I was a little hesitant to enter there. If you took that trade knowing it's aggressive, you know, I'd probably be okay with it, but I wouldn't take that trade. I just think it's too risky. And you actually get a failed second entry short here, but now you got to go long right to the highs of the range, and you see what happened here. You probably would have gotten burned on that one. So It backs up again, but it comes back and you get a triple test here. But the key to this one is a failed break lower below that little double bottom there and all that congestion, and it closes off that key entry point. But look how both the open and the close of those two bars right there are right on that key entry point. And this actually has a long stem and closes all. That's a very bullish bar, and you get to go long above the EMA. I like that trade. It's only a first entry by this chart count, but you can clearly see it moves down, tries to go higher. So there's a little hidden second entry there. It's a failed break out of that congestion running across there. If you wanted to draw that, you can see that little congestion area. So it's a failed break out there. It comes back in and you go long inside it. But more importantly, it's a triple test here and it's off the key entry point, and it's a huge, nice, bullish, very bullish bar. So you might let this one break higher and then drop a limit order a couple of ticks back, and that would have worked, give you a little better entry. But I don't have a problem going long one tick above that. You could probably argue for this to be green as well if you don't, if you're not a real strong chart reader. This would be a little aggressive for an average trader. So it's right there on the borderline of being green and blue. But as you can see, that was the trade of the day. If you catch this one trade, you got a nice move. But even if you don't want to be aggressive, just a few minutes later, you get this trade, which is a double test of the breakout of the range area. Notice that we came back and tested it once, then we came back again 2 more times and tested it. So, and you get this nice bullish bar. It is a little congestive, but if you understand why that prices are trying to come back, most breakouts will fail or at least attempt to fail. But when you get a double test like that and a nice signal bar, just take that long. And at that point, at the very minimum, you'd be looking for, I'd probably play it more like that. Measured move, which is way up here. We actually got a good bit more than that. And you clearly got this green channel working higher. There's another pull back to the trend line here, but there's just not a very good setup. Same thing here. You've just been too far away from the EMA for too long. But if you're just patient, a few minutes later, you get 2 legs back and you get another. Notice you got that support and you get a little failed break lower. And look at that big bullish bar that closes on its high, second entry long. Technically, it was a second entry when it broke here, but I wouldn't have a problem. Wait, they have it matching lows, so you could go long 1 tick above that bar. You couldn't trade it 1 tick above this one because it's not an engulfing bar. But the safer play is to probably wait on the higher low, which comes here, and you can see how it takes on off, and you just get. So now you got your break of this yellow channel, 2 legs back, and then you got your break, and then 2 legs up. There's actually a little third push, and then it corrects. It drops down a little spike in channel, but you get your break of this channel, a new low, and then a third. This is basically a higher low at this point, but it's also like a triple test there. But that's a second entry long. Notice that new high. You pull back, and when it breaks higher above that bar right there, that's a second entry long. Then it corrects again. So now when it breaks above this bar right here, that's a second entry long. And I took that. That's the one that I recorded for you. I took that with 1 tick above that. Stopped me in, ran up real quick, easy scalp. No real heat at all, maybe a tick or so. And it's a relatively low risk bar. I think it was 5 ticks. Yep, 5 ticks. So if you're wrong, you don't lose a whole lot. And if you're right, and especially if it takes on off like you would expect it to, but it didn't do that. It just stayed in this range. It turned out to be a range. It wasn't so clear this was a range yet. It was pretty clear there was some support here, but we didn't have this resistance really here yet. But when it turned down right here, it was obvious it was probably a range. So I didn't get a runner on this one. Got stopped out at break even on the runners. Comes back, but it just gives you another opportunity, and you would have got the second chance, and I would have exited again right here. It went a little bit higher. At the very least, the way I would have played this the second go round is I either would have exited my runner right here, or I would move it up 1 tick below each bar. So this was a great chance to just do this all over again. And it runs up, and of course it breaks out and fails just like you would expect. And then you get a second leg up, and it kind of rolls over and sells off after that. Unfortunately, you don't get a chance to enter this last move. You could have got this one, but there's no chance really to get. This is just too congestive. Right into resistance. No way I'm going to take that trade. So it runs up, makes a high. We tried to go higher multiple times, and then it tries to go higher once. And you actually get a second entry long there. It breaks higher and fails and turns down. Just go short one tick below that, or wait for this to close and put your sell stop one tick below that. And that's a failed second entry long, reversal type pattern. Normally you like it to come back from this side, but when it broke lower here, it was pretty obvious we were going back lower. You're really back inside this trading range is what happens. And so I like going short there. And it runs on down, and then notice you make a low there, first entry, and then second entry. And again, that's a little congested, but it breaks higher and fails and turns down. I like going short, one tick below that. I don't know if I would have waited. By the time this closed, there's a lot of stem there, and you got to go short kind of right into the lows. The better play would be let it break lower here and then maybe drop a limit order, even a tick or two back, just to give yourself a little more room before these lows. But I really wouldn't have a problem just going short there because we're probably coming down to at least test this, and maybe we get another trend down, which we end up doing. And this one kind of takes off. There's another failed second entry long here right off the key entry point, and it's 2 attempts to go higher, but we don't get back to the resistance to test it very well. We don't get back to the EMA. You've been away a little while. You got to go short really right at the lows. There is a trap there, so it may not matter so much, but I'd probably wait on a better trade. And you really don't get one. This is very tempting being that far away from the EMA. But really, you could argue there's a close there, but that's not very convincing, and these are turning down right off of it. And there is what looks like a little bit of an overshoot, but if you come to those last closes, you could argue that that's not a very convincing overshoot either. The key here would be if you got a nice higher low with plenty of room back to the trend line and the EMA, and you just don't get it, it takes off. So people knew what we're kind of, most everybody probably figures you're going to bounce there because we did have a breakout here and it failed, and the overall bias today has been up. So no surprise that it shot up like that. But unfortunately, you can't gamble on that unless you get a good entry, and we don't really get a good entry. But if you wait just a second, you get a first entry, second entry, and so there's a second entry long there. It's the first break of that channel, and it just runs right back up to the upper side. We tested a couple of times before it turns lower. Unfortunately, you don't get a good signal bar here on this second entry. We don't really care too much about second entries on a range, but if you get a good setup at the key entry point, like a short off the highs or a long off the lows, and it does turn out to be a second entry, then that just gives it a little more, that makes it a little bit more important, but we're not necessarily looking for second entries. So I say that a lot, but people tend to miss that. So make sure you understand that. If you try to trade second entries inside this range, you'll get chopped to pieces. So you still have to follow the range rules, but if you follow the range rules and you get a second entry with your setup, then that makes it pretty good. So, but that signal bar is not, that's your signal bar, and it's just too bullish. And there's technically a second entry here because it broke lower and then went up again and came back down and makes a little 2-bar. So when it broke below that, it's really a second entry there. I would really wait and count this as the second entry, and either one of them are good setups, so it doesn't matter anyway. You had an opportunity for a possible long there, and that was it. So not much going on after lunchtime. It's really quiet, not a lot of volume. I just think people are a little afraid to buy into these very highs, and there's not much selling coming in. So it just kind of, eventually we did make that next leg down. You can see it right there. There's leg one. You measure leg one and you get leg two, and there it is. That's a perfect measured move basically. So, and that's what I saw today. And believe it or not, we got through this thing in 15 minutes again. So I'm starting to realized my goal of trying to do these in 15 minutes to 20 minutes tops. And but we've just had so much price action and so much volatility and so many trades on some days that I could easily do a 45-minute video. But I like to keep them about 15 to 20 minutes, and I think that's a good. That's more typical of a normal market. So this is more typical of a normal day. I'm still looking at that 4,100 target. Are we going to make it? I don't know. We're really close. We got to 40, 75 or 76 again today, which is pretty much right where we had problems yesterday. So they're strong. We might have inched a little higher. So there's really a lot of resistance right in here. And I think it's more the fact that people are just reluctant to buy in here more than it is a lot of selling, because we don't really sell off. We corrected here both days, but we don't really sell off. We just kind of correct. There it is today. Yesterday we traded up and we corrected a little bit into that. We really just kind of went sideways, I guess. But there's a little two-legged correction. We took most of it back, but today we actually did close lower, I believe, from yesterday. Yeah, we closed up here yesterday, and today we're closing down. Probably going to, yeah, probably going to close down here. I guess it could change before it's over, but anyway, pretty good trading day. There's some good trades here early. Not a lot of trades, but this is this is like a very normal kind of day in the ES, at least prior to COVID. So the market feels more organized, it's moving much smoother and more fluidly than it has in the past. You don't see these days where it runs straight up like this and then straight back down. Of course, we got some moves up and down here, but this was, the price action really played out. It wasn't just up and down out of the blue. I would say that was a pretty good move up out of the blue, but it was no surprise here once we had the break and two legs up to a new high that we sold off here. And you would expect we may get another leg, which we did right to here, and now we've kind of bounced off that. So fairly straightforward, typical price action. So it does help to trade these. And another thing, I didn't show it here, you could probably look at this, consider this as a downtrend, like so. I don't think you really need it, but you could consider that. As long as you went to the short-term stuff here, you had everything you needed. But this is probably valid here. This down two-tiered down channel. I just don't think it really helps you too much. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you enjoy the live trade I put up today. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.